Following the surrender of Germany to the Allied forces in May 1945, around 8 million prisoners of war, concentration camp survivors, and other displaced persons took to the roads of Germany in an attempt to return home. For most, the decision to return was an easy one to make, and by autumn, the United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration, or UNRWA, managed to repatriate up to 7 million displaced persons, also known as DPs. However, for the around 50,000 displaced Jews, for many, returning home was not an option. They were fairly certain that their families had not survived the war and that their homes had been destroyed or seized. Therefore, to provide temporary residence for these survivors, the Allies created displaced persons camps on military barracks and former concentration camps. Initially, the Allies did not recognise the Jews as a separate group to other DPs, and instead grouped people together in camps based on their nationality. This meant that many Jews were forced to live alongside many non-Jewish DPs, who made no secret of their anti-Semitism. Even more shocking, often Jews were forced to live with their former oppressors, such as concentration camp guards, causing immense psychological problems for survivors. In June 1945, Earl G. Harrison, the US representative of the Intergovernmental Committee on Refugees, was sent to Germany to assess the needs of DPs. After visiting the camps, Harrison sent President Truman a scathing report of the Jewish DPs' treatment. Many were living under armed guard, sometimes in the camps that they had initially been liberated from, and in crowded and unsanitary conditions. Harrison's report resulted in the US military authorities meeting Jewish demands for separate camps, with improved living conditions and rations, and in December 1945, the British followed suit. Most camps were in the US zone, the largest at Feldafing, Florenwald, and Landsberg, all near Munich. However, the largest was at Bergen-Belsen in the British zone. A handful of camps were also established in the French zone. The creation of these separate camps led to the arrival of tens of thousands of mostly Polish Jews who were fleeing renewed anti-Semitic persecution in their homelands. Between 1945 and 1948, the British and US zones would become a temporary home for around 250,000 Jews. Even before the creation of Jewish camps, Jewish survivors set up the Central Committee of the Liberated Jews in both the US and British zones. These committees worked alongside UNRWA and Jewish relief organisations to distribute rations and search for remaining relatives. They also expressed the demands of Jewish survivors, such as the need for separate camps and the right to emigrate out of Europe. These representative bodies, combined with the creation of separate Jewish DP camps, led to a distinct group identity among survivors called the Sharit HaPlatah. This was the Hebrew term for the surviving remnant of European Jews, who shared experiences of survival, loss, and trauma. However, this did not mean that the Jewish DPs were a homogeneous group, as they differed in their beliefs and levels of observance. Nevertheless, a new Jewish identity emerged from the harsh conditions in the camps, mutual experiences of war, and the collective need to mourn and commemorate their dead. Taking part in religious rituals was one of the first ways that Jews reaffirmed their identity. The Kaddish, the Jewish prayer of mourning, was central in worship, even for those who had lost their faith during the Holocaust. This united both Orthodox and secular Jews, providing them with some form of consolation. This, alongside Sabbath rituals such as lighting candles, celebration of Jewish festivals, and building memorial sites, shows how religious observance reaffirmed the existence and persistence of the Jewish people. Jewish survivors also reclaimed their identity through the expansion of family. The steady rush of weddings in the DP camps united camp neighbours or distant surviving friends who did not know each other very much, demonstrating a desire to find companionship in the absence of family and friends. In Bergen-Belsen alone, during the first 2 years after liberation, 1,437 marriages had taken place, and as one woman survivor remembered, there were so many marriages, sometimes really strange marriages that never would have happened before the war. Despite weddings not always being a joyous occasion, as many were performed out of loneliness rather than love, marriage symbolised a conscious assertion of Jewish life. Following these weddings came a record number of babies being born, and in 1946, the birth of Jewish babies in the DP camps saw the highest birth rate in the world. The vast amount of pregnancies stemmed from the fear of many women believing that their experiences in concentration camps had left them infertile, but perhaps most significantly, being pregnant was a way to show that the Nazis had no power over them anymore. This was material evidence that they had survived. The Jewish DP camps became not only the setting for the literal revival of Jewish life, but also Jewish culture, as can be seen with the publication of over 100 newspapers in the camps. These included Our Voice in Belsen, the Free World in Feldafing, and the Landsberg Camp newspaper. Newspapers were immensely important for Jewish survivors, as they had been deprived of any sort of regular news in the Nazi concentration camps. Survivors were also desperate to be heard, and newspapers gave them space to publish their experiences, whilst the inclusion of serial novels carried on the tradition of pre-war Jewish culture. The press was published in multiple languages, however most newspapers were in Yiddish. Not only was this the common language of Eastern European Jews, but writing and publishing in Yiddish showed that the Nazis had failed to exterminate Jewish culture. Another way in which Jewish survivors revived their pre-war traditions was through the development of theatre. According to one relief worker, amongst all the cultural activities, the finest camp effort is undoubtedly the theatre group. In Bergen-Belsen, the Katzet Theater put on performances focusing on classical Yiddish theatre that originated in musical, dance and pantomime representations of legends from the Hebrew Bible. Plays were also put on to share Jewish experiences of the Holocaust, such as Partisans, in which a Jewish singer seduces some German soldiers and steals weapons to give to partisan fighters. These sort of plays allowed the audience to regain some sort of agency instead of being portrayed simply as passive victims. Theatre was one of the first opportunities for Jewish survivors to come to terms with the Holocaust, and having access to some of the Yiddish classics allowed survivors to re-identify with their pre-war culture. Finally, Jewish survivors managed to reclaim their identity through education and training. In order for children to gain a deeper understanding of Jewish culture and religion, they attended Hebrew classes, learned about Jewish history, and celebrated religious holidays by acting in biblical plays, reinforcing a collective national identity. As the Jewish Agency for Palestine sponsored many schools, education in the DP camps meant an emphasis on Zionism, the belief that there should be an independent Jewish state in Palestine. According to the psychologist Ernst Papanek, acquiring a Zionist group mentality was necessary for children to feel part of a group identity. In 1946 he wrote, "More than any other children, they must regain their conviction that they are accepted, that they are members of a group, that they are no longer an object to be handled, but human beings able to cooperate and share in democratic decisions." As well as formal education, the DP camps placed a huge emphasis on sports, with numerous football and boxing teams being set up. Not only was sport important for survivors' physical recuperation after the Holocaust, it was also vital for the spiritual renewal of Jews as a whole, and taking part in sport was viewed as preparation for a life in Palestine. Just like sport, vocational training for adults in jobs such as metal and carpentry work as well as hairdressing was also seen as necessary for obtaining skills that would prepare them for a life once they left the DP camps. The creation of the State of Israel in May 1948, coupled with the US DP Acts, dramatically altered the situation for the Jews. By 1952, only one camp remained, and the total number of Jews in Germany fell to 12,000. The majority of Jews made the decision to leave, whether to be reunited with their families or simply because they saw no future for themselves in Europe. Around 100,000 Jews emigrated to the US, and up to 142,000 would find their new home in the State of Israel.